Now, if I take, let's say, this social dimension, and I look particularly at your employees, Satya, and the last 2 years have created a completely new conception of the nature of work. And I know you also had home office and so on. How did the last 2 years and the pandemic change, let's say, your relationship with your employees?
Yeah, it's sort of very related even to the very first question you asked as to sort of what's that leadership principle that perhaps you've learned, and I talked about caring. But one thing that I've been thinking a lot about in relationship with our own employees and our go forward, what does it look like? I think we have, interestingly enough, coming out of this pandemic, gotten to a point where we need to refound the company. Because I borrow this phrase from one of my colleagues at the Microsoft board, Reid Hoffman, who wrote about refounding as something that needs to happen from time to time in companies. And I feel that this is a great time to think about refounding. Because after all, here's the thing. I used to say, we hired 60,000 people, Klaus, over the last 2 years. A lot of growth, that's like 40% of the company or so. And then we said, we now need to onboard them. Then I realized that it's not the 60,000 people. In fact, the entirety of the company needs to be re-onboarded. And so we are going through that. So essentially conceptualizing, refounding the company for a changed world, changed times, because I think none of us are coming out of this pandemic assuming we're going to go back to 2019. We have to find a new way going forward. And in that context, employees and their expectations are paramount. And so I think that it's a great place for, I think, all of us. They are one of the most important stakeholders. We always talk about employees. Without employees, there's no company. Whether it's about their compensation or whether it's about their need for flexibility and their changed expectations from leadership and management, the lived culture experience, I think, are all places where we have to refound our mission and our culture, and that's definitely something that we are hard at work at.
I would define it in the following way. When before the pandemic, we very much were talking about life-work balance. But now, after the pandemic, we have to talk about work-life integration.
Yeah.
Because we have the professional life at home. We should also enable probably people when they are at work to take care of their family. Would you agree? And
yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think when people talk about flexibility, that's what that is, which is all of us have to harmonize our work and life, as you said. And in order to do that, each of us needs flexibility. And any workplace, in fact, one of the interesting data points I have is on LinkedIn, if you go and look at the jobs, which now publicize the flexibility they provide, it's the fastest growing attribute of new jobs.
Yeah.
So I think it's now becoming an expectation that the workplace will integrate with people's need for flexibility so that they can achieve what you just described as the harmony between work and life.
You could also take this point a little bit more forward, and you could say, in order to create this harmony, the purpose of the work is much more important, because in an old world, you went for work in order to earn your living. But now in this new world, when you have the two combined, actually you speak about your life purpose.
Yeah, in fact.
And would you?
Yeah, in fact, people talk about what's happening in the labor market as great resignation. The reality is, if you look at the data, it's really not the great resignation. It's the great reshuffle, because people are actually not leaving the workforce. They're changing their jobs because they want either a different profession, a different industry, or a different company. And so one of the things, to your point, it is about really finding the meaning in your work, where what you want and what the company is doing are resonating. And I think that that's going to become very, very important. And it's fantastic. I think in general, an empowered employee, an empowered labor movement, I think is a much needed thing for companies to really get to a place where they're able to thrive. Because otherwise, if work is transactional, I think the company suffers.
Yeah, but Satya, in reality, I mean, in the daily life of the company of Microsoft, how do you implement it? What would you say? What are the key facets of this integration?
To me, that's why I think I look at even my job and the job of every leader and every employee in Microsoft. It's the lived culture. Like ultimately, what is a company? Company is what happens to me every day when I walk into the company. Am I able to bring my best, do my best, and get deep satisfaction and meaning? If that is not achievable, it's very, very hard to sort of talk about a lot of concepts in the abstract. So I think I always bring it down to lived experience. And the lived experience is not going to be perfect. Now, no company is going to be perfect all the time. But can we, in our case, one of the greatest blessings we've had is we took Carol Dweck's work on child psychology around growth mindset, took that and adopted that as our cultural meme and in terms of confronting our fixed mindset each day. And that has been super helpful, Klaus, because it gives even me every day, I'm not perfect, but can I go learn and help get better? And that attitude or that approach to culture, I think is the only way to help everyone, to your point, implement a lived culture that really thrives and strives to get better.
To change for a moment, we have just some minutes left, but to change the subject and to take something up which is very much in the mind of participants here, it's the value chain and how do you home shore or reshore to create much more resilience in your system. And I coined the expression of trust shoring, which means you have to look not only at your corporate company partner to have trust into him, but also the government which is behind. Does this have an influence on your corporate policies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what the world sort of realized is perhaps a couple of things. One is a super optimized value chain may not be the most resilient value chain in times of crisis. So therefore, thinking about the tail event impact on what is or your resilience is now, I think, not a tabletop exercise, but I think every board, every company, every country is going through. But take Ukraine. It's actually very interesting. If Ukraine, in the name of sovereignty, did not have the ability to migrate all of their critical systems to a public cloud that's running in Europe, it wouldn't be resilient. So I think even the definition of what resilience looks like and continuity looks like also has multiple dimensions. But there is certain amount of nearshoring, certain amount of reconfiguring, certain amount of multiple sourcing. This, I think, is all going to become very, very key because, in other words, you have to test for all kinds of tail events. The next tail event may not be the type of thing that we had. This may not be a pandemic. It may be something else. But the point is, do you have resilience? And I think that that's definitely an exercise every business in every country is going through. But I do believe that connectivity is still important because that is not, in some sense, connectivity is needed for resilience. But what type of configurations are there in the connective tissue? That's, I think, the real question.
So it's the interoperability which
Yeah, I think in terms of network paths. See, the thing is, whenever you have a graph that has got only a single path, it's problematic. But if you have multiple paths, then you can traverse the graph much more easier. And that, I think, is, so that's why it's a supply web and not a supply chain.
One very last question. You are now, if not the highest valued company, where is the limit? Where do you see the limit for? And you had so tremendous success in the last years. Where do you see a limit?
Look, I think...
If there is any.
At the end of the day, our growth is subject to the following limit, right? Which is the world around us. I always say this, which is Microsoft will only do well when the world around us is doing much better. So in other words, there is no way for Microsoft to be successful given our business model if the input we produce, which is digital technology, is not creating tons of value-added output that is leading to economic growth in the world. So if there's one thing that I think we all have to still strive for, is inflation-adjusted economic growth in the world that is aligned with the planet, that is more equitable, right? And that, to me, is going to be the most important thing that we will have to achieve in the world in order to earn our right to continue as a business.
So I think on behalf of the participants, I wish you a good path into this future.
Thank you. Thank you very much.